of credit or guarantees, finding new ways to grow your business. End-to-end import solutions for your business? Not without trade finance solutions. Standard Bank, it can be.
It all begins with a dream. Even in the middle of a pandemic, when so much has been lost and many hopes and dreams deferred, we still believe that new dreams can be realized. Even in tough times, hope can heal even the deepest wounds and see our country, its people, and the youth live to dream again. Because we believe that every great journey begins by taking that very first step. We invested 75,000 in Malangeni towards making sure that over 200 pairs of small feet can wear shoes to school and be allowed to chase their dreams. Because we believe in fueling tomorrow's dreams today, we invested 150,000 in Malangeni towards supporting the Junior Achievement National Program and the Enactus Program in 2021. Because we believe a healthy nation is a nation destined for greatness. On International Women's Day, 8 March 2021, we opened the door to a fully refurbished, COVID-compliant ward for our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. We invested 1.5 million in Malangeni in collaboration with the Resource Mobilization Committee towards the rehabilitation of the Raleigh Fitkin Memorial Female Ward. Because we believe that the future is in our hands and the wealth is in our soil, we are helping train women and the youth to realize their dreams. 500,000 in Malangeni was invested towards the purchase of 4 farming tunnels for the innovative Tunnel Agri Project in partnership with the Women Farmer Foundation and the United Nations. Because when we rebuild together, we can thrive even better than yesterday. We invested 9,000 facial masks to 4,500 students and teachers in 8 community schools. Sewing machinery to young female entrepreneurs, as well as welding tools and equipment to the School for the Deaf. All in partnership with the Royal Eswatini Sugar Corporation. Since 1998, Eswatini has banked on us to fulfill her dreams. Eswatini is our home, and because you can dream, you help us drive her growth. Together, Standard Bank, it can be.
What's your measure of success? Is it how many people are clapping for you at the finish line? That will be quite warm. Is it the priceless lessons you've picked up along the way? Definitely worth holding on to those. Is it perhaps how much money you make while you're in your sleep? That's everyone's goal, isn't it? All these would be great to realize, but does your corporate and investment banker understand your vision? Because I need mine as committed as I am in my business. No half measures. Fully invested. Innovative in finding solutions, because we're all pretty sharp here. So, intelligent too then. Understand the numbers and what they mean. Intuitive. To see things I don't and have my back. Involved. Fully. So, my success? Corporate and investment banking from Standard Bank. We're all in. I know better than anyone the difficulty of running your own business. To have a client that has a demand for a product and you know just where to get it, and for a good price, somewhere overseas maybe. And the most difficult part about that being having all the money to pay for the product before you can get paid for it by your client. But you already know all of that. But did you know that with Standard Bank's trade finance solutions, you don't have to worry about that aspect of running your business? Because all the forex risk, the working capital finance you need, letters of credit or guarantees are covered by a partner you can trust, making it easy for you to do what you're good at, finding new ways to grow your business. End-to-end import solutions for your business? Not without trade finance solutions. Standard Bank.
It all begins with a dream. Even in the middle of a pandemic, when so much has been lost and many hopes and dreams deferred, we still believe that new dreams can be realized. Even in tough times, hope can heal even the deepest wounds and see our country, its people, and the youth live to dream again. Because we believe that every great journey begins by taking that very first step. We invested 75,000 in Malangeni towards making sure that over 200 pairs of small feet can wear shoes to school and be allowed to chase their dreams. Because we believe in fueling tomorrow's dreams today, we invested 150,000 in Malangeni towards supporting the Junior Achievement National Program and the Enactus Program in 2021. Because we believe a healthy nation is a nation destined for greatness. On International Women's Day, 8 March 2021, we opened the door to a fully refurbished, COVID-compliant ward for our mothers, our sisters, and our daughters. We invested 1.5 million in Malangeni in collaboration with the Resource Mobilization Committee towards the rehabilitation of the Raleigh Fitkin Memorial Female Ward. Because we believe that the future is in our hands and the wealth is in our soil, we are helping train women and the youth to realize their dreams. 500,000 in Malangeni was invested towards the purchase of 4 farming tunnels for the innovative Tunnel Agri Project in partnership with the Women Farmer Foundation and the United Nations. Because when we rebuild together, we can thrive even better than yesterday. We invested 9,000 facial masks to 4,500 students and teachers in 8 community schools. Sewing machinery to young female entrepreneurs, as well as welding tools and equipment to the School for the Deaf. All in partnership with the Royal Eswatini Sugar Corporation. Since 1998, Eswatini has banked on us to fulfill her dreams. Eswatini is our home, and because you can dream, you help us drive her growth. Together, Standard Bank, it can be.
What's your measure of success? Is it how many people are clapping for you at the finish line? That will be quite warm. Is it the priceless lessons you've picked up along the way? Definitely worth holding on to those. Is it perhaps how much money you make while you're in your sleep? That's everyone's goal, isn't it? All these would be great to realize, but does your corporate and investment banker understand your vision? Because I need mine as committed as I am in my business. No half measures. Fully invested. Innovative in finding solutions, because we're all pretty sharp here. So, intelligent too then. You know, understand the numbers and what they mean. Intuitive. To see things I don't and have my back. Involved. Fully. So, my success? Corporate and investment banking from Standard Bank. We're all in. I know better than anyone the difficulty of running your own business. To have a client that has a demand for a product and you know just where to get it, and for a good price, somewhere overseas maybe. And the most difficult part about that being having all the money to pay for the product before you can get paid for it by your client. But you already know all of that. But did you know that with Standard Bank's trade finance solutions, you don't have to worry about that aspect of running your business? Because all the forex risk, the working capital finance you need, letters of credit or guarantees are covered by a partner you can trust, making it easy for you to do what you're good at, finding new ways to grow your business. End-to-end import solutions for your business? Not without trade finance solutions. Standard Bank, it
Today, we also have the privilege of not only hosting an audience in person, which we have today, but also online. So we'd like to take this opportunity to welcome our audience, Swazi TV. We are also live on Twitter, We're also live on Eswatini's Twitter feed and YouTube channel and Facebook feed, plus Standard Bank's Twitter and Facebook feed. So a very warm welcome to our audience, and we are very excited to have you with us today. In return for your captive presence, I promise you a delectable lineup to feed your famished appetites. Besides a great breakfast today, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers to satiate your taste buds and help you to prepare with the right tools to navigate the turbulent times in 2022 and make it your best year yet. My name is Ricky Holloway, and I am the head of digital and e-commerce for Standard Bank Eswatini. I've been a proud member of this blue family for about 15 years. I must say the only issue with being addicted to banking is the withdrawals. Quite traumatic, I must say. I am privileged and honored to be your host for today, and what an exciting forum we have planned ahead. Themed business sustainability in turbulent times. Now, before we start, let's get the formalities out the way. Firstly, no, I am not related to Trevor Noah, don't know him. Both our moms are from Africa, and yes, we were born in Africa, not related, I don't have his number. Number two, in case the fire alarm goes off, please note the exit, and if a speaker takes too long, you're also very welcome. Some of us love to talk. Thirdly, breakfast, please help yourselves at the back, loads of food, but please, 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 cutlery stays here. Okay. And lastly, for due diligence, should anyone cough more than 2 times, we have a VIP quarantine booth. The only Corona we allow here is served after 5 p.m. in a cold bottle. Speaking of Corona, this virus has only been the beginning of our economic and social challenges, and the devastation we've seen across the globe has been quite challenging for all of us. And just as when we thought that Corona was the only thing we'd have to deal with, 4th wave, 5th wave, 6th wave, we then have Ukraine and Russia invasion that started on the 24th of February. So very unprecedented times. Some of us may think that the 44 million people that are impacted are just a distant issue, not affecting us. But I guarantee you that over the next few weeks, months, those that are very far from the battlefield will feel themselves affected and impacted through the ripple effects of this impasse that we see abroad. The implications for the rest of Europe, Africa, and the global economic and social health will be far-reaching. We may not have the answers and solutions here today, but what we may be able to do is to help you navigate them. And we've got a beautiful lineup of guest speakers to share and help you get through it this year. To help us and lead us into this discussion in uncertain times, it is my honor to introduce a man who needs no introduction to our viewers online and to the audience. A man with such great vision, it is said he could read into a Sangoma's future. He joined the bank in 2016 from PwC, and please give us a chance to give a warm welcome to our Chief Executive Officer at Standard Bank Eswatini, Mr. Mvuselelo Fagutse.
Colleagues, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning to our viewers online. Good morning. I don't know which camera pictures the viewers online, but I'll try and look at this one. But yeah, thank you for getting up early to join us this morning, those viewers that are online and those presenters that are online. And thank you all for driving all the way up to Eswatini for the economic session. It is It has been a long time since we had interactions of this nature, thanks to COVID, but it's kept us away, it's kept us in the captive environment of our homes. Some of those homes went into overheat, and there has been a lot of unpleasant experiences of spending too much time in the home. So I know that people have been looking forward to getting out and mixing with other people, because otherwise the roofs are going to fall over us, those that are not used to staying at home. But it's also helped to build the family, because lo and behold, when you run away from home, you run away from responsibilities. So we're here to work so that we can take something back home. But COVID has not been kind to a lot of us. We have lost friends, we have lost colleagues, we have lost business leaders, we have lost politicians. It's not been kind in a manner that we thought HIV was bad until COVID came, and you didn't have to be sick. You just heard that someone had just passed away, and you couldn't even bury them. You know, that was an experience. But the world is slowly moving out of it, or moving towards adjusting to coexist with COVID. It looks like it is going to be with us for a longer time than we anticipated. We thought it was going to be a 2020 thing, but it's continuing to be with us. So I think we just have to find a way of managing to do business with it. It has been a tough 2 years, but we see economic recovery happening across the globe. All the forecasts are looking positive. Eswatini included is looking positive. I'm not going to pretend that I'm an economist. I'm just an accountant, so I can count the numbers, but I can't predict the future. I can verify that the numbers coming from the past are accurate. The accounting standards have tried to be progressive and move towards what is called estimating the future. And I don't know how good those numbers are going to be, but accountants are not good at looking into the future, because they are pin counters. They look at the history and tell you whether your numbers are correct or not. But we'll see with time. All this came out of what happened in 2010 with the economic meltdown, and global organizations fell over, and people asked, where were the financial statements? Why didn't the financial statements reflect that companies are not going to be going concerns? And what we're trying to do now is to make sure that we can predict the future. We can build some sort of uncertainty into the numbers that we report on every year, as it were. But yeah, we look forward to today. I think we have a lineup of speakers. The good thing about COVID is that it's taught us to be able to work with people both here and outside of the country. So we're going to have speakers that are online already. I can't see them, but I hope they are online. But also we're going to have speakers that are here telling us about how the economy is going to look like. And we're quite excited because we all want to see economic recovery. We all want to see an economy that can generate and create new jobs. We all want to see a thriving economy, because the world out there is very unpleasant for people that do not have the opportunity to get up and do something for themselves. So we have to give them hope by creating jobs, by creating an active economy. And I think with many products that we all have, because banking is just a very small piece of the pie. We are just the intermediaries. We hold your money and we help those that need the money. While we hold it, we use it. We just take a bit to keep the business going, and we make some people unhappy as a consequence, but you have to pay for convenience at times. But we don't take a lot. That's what I can promise. But yeah, I look forward to the event today, and I welcome our speakers both here and online. And I'm not going to introduce them because I think Rick is doing a good job at that, so I'll leave that up to him. But thank you for making time to be with us, and I look forward to a very interactive session, because I think we'll be allowed to do Q&As and answer questions and give our views. So yeah, maybe next year we'll get the minister to come and sit with us. I've spared him for today. Thank you. Good morning, colleagues.
Thank you, Ntolo. I think definitely I do empathize totally with the words about the appreciation of being here in person and being able to interact and sit at arm's length with a colleague, with a friend, things we have not been able to do for quite a long time. And I think we are humans of social interaction by design. So very appreciative, given the pandemic, what we've been able to do and being able to coexist. Next, I would like to introduce our next speaker and take this opportunity. Her name is Ferishka Barath, and due to her stunning looks, she's been said to be the cousin to Salma Hayek. And I must say that she's also not just all beauty, also brains. She is a Standard Bank Group economist, and she'll be taking us through the group's view on the global economic output. So let's start to understand what's happening out there, and she's going to take us on that journey. She joined Standard Bank on the Risk Graduate Program in 2012, and after spending 6 years in various roles within Standard Bank's CIB, which is the Corporate and Investment Banking Risk area, she then joined the Standard Bank economics team about 4 years ago. She holds an MBA specializing in banking from the University of London and a BSc from the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where I also obtained my degrees, so cousins in university. And in true social distancing style, she'll be joining us online. So I'm not too sure if Ferishka, can you hear us online?
Hello, Ricky. Thank you for the very kind.
Excellent.
Can you see me?
Sorry, Ferishka, can you try again? We missed you there. I think just network connectivity.
Hi, Ricky. Hear me?
Please go ahead. Please go ahead, Ferishka.
Hi, Ricky. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, loud and clear.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to Standard Bank Eswatini for the invite. This is definitely one of the events I look forward to presenting at. Just give me a minute or two to configure my slides and let me know when you can see them.
Okay, we can see the slides going fast. Okay, African markets in global context slide. So please go ahead.
Great. So that's what you're supposed to be seeing. Good morning and thank you for having me again. So we'll start with this presentation and then we'll move to Q&A. I'm actually looking forward to hearing your views and discussing a lot of this further with you. So let's begin with themes that we think will shape the economic narrative for 2022. There are some country-specific factors here, I'm aware of that, but we believe that they are a fundamental part to the continental narrative because they actually shape the regional narrative as well. From here, there are themes that I would say specifically or apply more to the Eswatini context. And for me, if I had to single them out, there'd be the geopolitical tensions, the changes in the global monetary environment, and the evolution of the pandemic. So my presentation aims to examine these factors and then bring them home and bring them into the Eswatini context and, explaining how it actually affects the country's outlook as well as the regional outlook. So let's begin with something quite topical at the moment, and that is the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So here, I think I should start by saying that the duration and the scale of the Russia-Ukraine conflict remains uncertain. But what is certain to us is that the global production networks are now facing another shock very soon after the shock that they had faced following the start of the pandemic in 2020 and the subsequent lockdowns. So supply chains have barely had a chance to recover, but now are undergoing another shock. But I mean, we also looked at the various channels through which the conflict could impact Africa. Again, I must emphasize the duration of the pandemic will be key in us assessing the severity of the shock. So in our view, there are a few channels through which the conflict will affect the macroeconomic environment in Africa. This includes financial markets, trade, transport and logistics, commodity and food prices, and the general flux of the supply chain. In my view, Eswatini would probably be most affected through the financial markets channel because of the rand, commodity and food prices, as well as the compounding disruptions of the supply chain. So as you can see, Africa's trade with both Russia and Ukraine is not material, specifically exports, if you compare that to imports. So imports here hold a larger share. You'd actually notice that Eswatini doesn't feature on this graph. And that is because when I graphed it, the trade links are so small that it didn't even show through alongside this data. So if you had to combine imports and exports to Russia and Ukraine, it is less than 0.005% of Eswatini's total trade. So this doesn't mean that the country's terms of trade or external accounts or current account is not going to be affected by the geopolitical events. So what is quite critical here is that Eswatini is a net oil importer. And what we've noticed with Eswatini and other countries that fall into this category on the continent is that we're probably going to see a significant deterioration in the trade balance this year. This is consistent with what we saw in previous oil shocks in 2008 and 2011. And we expect a deterioration in the terms of trade, and that's going to add some, external pressures. And with that in mind, we also looked at how oil prices behave during oil shocks. So what was interesting here was that oil prices remain elevated for a significant period after the geopolitical event or the factor causing the spike in oil prices actually is resolved or passes. It even remains quite elevated for some time, even as the uncertainties related to this event passes. So at the moment, it seems that oil prices will remain above $100 a barrel for the rest of this year, potentially declining to around $80 a barrel next year. But this is highly dependent on developments in the geopolitical conflict unfolding in Ukraine at the moment. But what you see on the slide is that you see Eswatini's main trading partners. And while Eswatini may not have direct links to Russia and Ukraine by way of trade, these countries do. And depending on the types of goods imported or traded, right, it's difficult for us to say how the supply chain would be broken. So, disruptions caused higher up in the supply chain by the conflict could eventually start filtering through to Eswatini through these links. So think of it as a secondary effect rather than a primary one. And if you just look at the goods that Africa imports from Russia and Ukraine, these include wheat, iron, steel, and fertilizer. So all of these products could see quite a sharp increase in input costs. And with the agricultural sector being a mainstay of this economy, fertilizer prices and fertilizer supply would be quite critical going into a planting season. And then another factor worth highlighting would be wheat imports. So given the trade links between Eswatini and South Africa, I think, this is quite an important point. Around a third of South Africa's wheat comes from Russia and Ukraine. And, given the high level of regional trade and regional integration, especially with food products and consumer good products, this is bound to have a knock-on effect on domestic food prices. And on food prices, already we're seeing quite a reaction following the start of the pandemic, or start of the conflict. And you can even trace, some movement at the start of the pandemic as well. If you look at the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization's food price index, and that is on the left-hand side of your screen. And, the thing here, and what I hear quite often, I hear that, the rand has been relatively stable and has had a appreciating bias recently to the dollar. Yes, I will follow that argument to an extent that it has benefited the inflationary environment to an extent. But the rate at which wheat prices and oil prices are rising, this could inflame inflation further. And I do believe the trajectory for domestic inflation is higher. And we're probably going to start seeing the pressures building quite consistently on a month-on-month basis. And it is my view that domestic inflation will remain above the Central Bank of Eswatini's target range for some time. And I say this because I also believe that while inflation will be inflamed and elevated, I also think it may be sticky. And I say this because if you look at the factors driving inflation, it's fuel inflation and food inflation. I suspect that these factors could keep inflation quite sticky. So that's something to consider when we're looking at inflation. But this actually ties together with what we're seeing globally in the monetary policy environment. We're seeing, inflationary pressures compound in the developed world as well as domestically. And the higher trajectory of inflation here, as well as in advanced economies, will probably prompt a more hawkish stance by developed market central banks, as well as our domestic central banks. So globally, we had expected a change in global monetary policy conditions this year. We expected the Fed, the US Federal Reserve that is, to lead this shift to a more tighter, less easy monetary policy stance that was consistent with the years of the pandemic and the epicenter of the pandemic and that shock as well. So we've already seen the Federal Reserve hike rates, and we saw it 2 weeks ago. But we believe that this hiking cycle seems to be better telegraphed, better communicated, and it's priced into the market. So we shouldn't really see too much of a sell-off in emerging market assets. And the rand tends to be one of the currencies that is very sensitive to changes in global risk sentiment and also susceptible to sell-offs when global risk appetite conditions change. So this time we've seen the reaction on the rand quite contained, and we expect that to continue. But there's still a risk that the Fed might actually hike rates faster than the market expects. And I say this because global inflationary pressures are mounting. And with oil prices being where they are and these disruptions in the supply chain compounding, with China now also going under another lockdown, I think, there is a chance for inflation to go and stay significantly higher than the Fed's forecasts. And if the Fed had to hike rates faster than the market expects, then we should see some more severe reaction on emerging market currencies. Then, with regards to domestic rates, we expect, the link between the South African repo rate and Eswatini's to remain in place. But with that said, our SA economic team expects at least a 25 bp hike for every MPC meeting this year. So while the Central Bank of Eswatini has already turned hawkish, we expect further policy hikes throughout this year as the SARB continues to hike the repo rate. Of course, this doesn't mean this is probably not the best outcome for growth, but I'll touch on that a bit later on in my presentation. Then, lastly, we'll move to COVID. So here we've seen somewhat of a shift in how African governments tend to manage the pandemic. And it is our view that as viral strains become more moderate, the pandemic would probably turn into an endemic in the medium term. So we're more likely to have the personal interactions that you were referring to in your introduction, Ricky. Then, the shift that we noticed, and I would say it's probably from the second half of last year, is that African economies or governments didn't necessarily impose stringent lockdowns as infections rose. The focus has definitely shifted to vaccinations. And that actually bodes quite well for economic growth and minimizing economic disruption. But I will admit that the vaccination drive got off to a very slow start last year. But we did see a pickup in vaccinations over the last quarter of last year and definitely over the first 2 months of this year. And this was largely a function of improved vaccination supply. I will admit that vaccination hesitancy and vaccination apathy are problems with regards to the vaccination rollout in general. But you'd notice that most countries on the continent and even our region seem to be gaining traction with their vaccination rollout. And another thing we noticed is that certain African governments are taking a harder stance on vaccinations, making it not possible for citizens to access certain public services if they're not vaccinated. So, there is a definite shift that is promoting vaccinations on the continent. So looking at Eswatini specifically, we also saw this trend that we've not seen lockdowns as stringent as what we saw in 2020. And we don't expect this level of stringency to continue or repeat itself this year. And this is something that would not disrupt growth momentum again and does bode well for the economic recovery that is underway, because we've definitely seen growth momentum start building on a quarterly basis toward, I would say, the last two, the quarter 2 and quarter 3 last year. So as I was saying, it does bode well for the recovery. Then with regards to our growth outlook, so here our forecasts mostly match the forecasts we put out in the January AMR. That is our flagship publication where we cover most countries on the continent. But since the AMR was published, we must admit that rising inflation globally could limit private consumption. And this is something that we're very wary about, and we are aware that this could derail the recovery in some of these markets, especially in the markets where private consumption tends to form a big part of GDP. But the thing about Africa is that it is government consumption that tends to drive growth in quite a few of these markets. So even though private consumption may fall off, levels that we saw pre-pandemic, still, we're quite confident that government consumption will continue, and these governments will execute their budgets. But for me and our view on Eswatini, like in most African markets, base effects have turned unfavorable in 2022. So what I mean by this is that the growth in 2022 is coming off a higher base in 2021. The higher base in 2021 was set or came about because growth, you would recall, was probably negative in most of these markets, Eswatini included, in 2020. So base effects is something that goes through various years, and it does affect the next year's growth outturn. So numerically, base effects could depress growth in Eswatini this year. But, for me, my growth outlook puts growth edging above 2.2% this year. And, with that said, I must acknowledge and highlight that global dynamics leave scope for downside. For me, I'll leave it there, and I'll take questions that you may have, and we can start our discussion.
Thank you so much, Farishka. That was so informative. I think we'll take a moment to do a brief Q&A if there are any questions we have for Farishka. Unfortunately, those online, we won't be able to respond to the online questions, but for those in person, I guess that's the privilege we have for being in the audience. So any questions from the audience?
Good morning. Morning. This is working on.
Good morning.
My name is Leon Jacobs from Swaziland, Malin. I did notice, thank you very much for a very informative briefing that we've seen so far. As you notice, Eswatini is very exposed to what is going on in South Africa, 80 and 85% import and exports respectively. So we have a keen interest. Now, the growth forecasts, I seem to notice that I keep on looking, I seem to miss what the growth forecasts are for South Africa, which to us actually matters the most. Maybe you could just give us a little bit an update on what we expect the growth forecast to be in South Africa.
So I think our South African economics team puts growth for this year at around 2%. The main factor that could derail growth domestically in South Africa is our unstable electricity generation sources. That's been a factor that has weighed on growth even through the pandemic. And with that said, without proper structural reform, addressing the electricity generation capacity and potentially the investment environment in South Africa, I don't think that growth in the medium term goes up significantly beyond these levels. With regards to South Africa actually returning to pre-pandemic levels, if you look at our growth trajectory going into the pandemic, we had already exhibited these weaknesses brought on by structural deficiencies. And now that the recovery from the pandemic has happened last year and base effects boosted growth, we think that we're going to return to a similar trajectory of growth between 0 and 2% that we saw in the years leading up to the pandemic.
Thank you very much.
We have another question down this side, and then we'll follow through to the next gentleman. Another mic here. Ladies, definitely ladies first.
Thank you very much for that presentation. My name is Pumzile Muhlakwana. I'm the MD of Total Energies. And I have a few questions. Firstly, related to your first slide, I noted that you hadn't mentioned the imports and exports from South Africa with Russia. So I'd be interested to know what percentage that is. And secondly, I'd be interested to also know what would drive the GDP growth in both Eswatini and South Africa, particularly from which sectors do we expect to see the most growth that would result in that 2 to 2% increase that you mentioned? Thank you.
So I'll have to get back to you with regards to the exact number with on the Ukraine-Russia SA trade links. I know our South African team was doing more work on that, and I can get that to you via our team in Eswatini. But with regards to the factors that I see driving growth in Eswatini this year, I do believe that the agricultural sector, which is a mainstay of the economy, will drive growth, and it will drive growth in the following way. If you look at how private private incomes evolve, a higher agricultural outturn typically augments private income and private expenditure. And you're going to get that spillover effect from a good agricultural outturn. Our in-house climate risk and climate change analysts believe that rainfall is going to be more than adequate this year in the region, Eswatini included, and I think that would feed into a good agricultural outturn. What I'm very wary about is the whole the fertilizer supply chain, and how that's going to affect agriculture, not only in Eswatini, but across the continent. So our markets that depend on agriculture in East Africa and even Southern Africa, we're definitely watching how these interactions will feed into our planting seasons and how that's going to affect our crop outturns eventually. With regards, well, I'm not going to make too many statements about the budget because I know the speaker after me will cover that in better detail and will provide better insights. But I think, government spending and government consumption will definitely support the outlook as well. For me, and what has been something that has brought me comfort for the region, is that the SACU revenue pool was revised upwards significantly in February when the South African budget was read. And this bodes well for the prospects of the SACU countries, because typically a higher SACU outturn also correlates to higher levels of growth. And I see that also feeding into a stronger outlook for Eswatini. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Farishka. We've got another question further in the audience, if we can arrange a microphone. Thank you.
Thank you, Karishna, for the presentation. I think my question is also touching on the last slide, where you were talking about GDP growth in the country. My name is Ntjintja. I'm from IDCE. Basically, we are on driving employment in the country. So I just want to find out over and above those sectors that will actually be driving the economy, just to know that which are those sectors that have got potential to increase employment rates basically in the country. If you can just dissect those sectors of the economy that have got potential to create more employment. Thank you.
Okay, so for me, what I'd like to see in Eswatini, I'd like to see an increase in investment. I'd like to see investment plans that were shelved during the pandemic, come back. I'd like to see investment reach the highs that we saw in the 2000s. And I believe that once private investment is restored and we get some level of momentum and positive momentum there, I think, sectors like the construction sector and sectors like the public work sector would definitely drive employment and be a sector that would absorb employment quite quickly. But I mean, this requires, structural changes in the policy environment and even, changes in global investor risk sentiment that would encourage this investment to come back. So for me, I think stimulating private investment will be key in actually creating jobs across the economy. And then other sectors to watch out for, and this is an answer an answer that applies to more countries than just Eswatini. I would say that, look at sectors that are future ready. And I believe a country like Nigeria tends to be up there with regards to promoting technology and employment in these future fields. And I'd like to see that in more of the countries that we cover, because I feel that in modernizing these economies, we would actually create jobs that did not exist in the past. And, focusing on technology and development, it would actually create a new sector and new jobs rather than jobs that we have had in the past. And it would actually also improve the competitiveness of the economy overall.
Thank you so much for that answer. I'm just going to take a point back to the earlier question raised around trade with Russia, and we're going to have some input from Mr. Lutando Vuba. Please.
Sure. Well, thanks, Ricky. Just Farishka, I thought I'd come in here because I have some of the info on the question that was raised. So with SA, the major exposure with Russia is mainly on wheat, accounting for 30% of dependency on importing that. So I think that's where you will probably see the knock-on effect for Eswatini, anything that's related to that production post-processing as well. The one that we probably were paying more attention to is SA's exposure when it comes to exports to Russia, accounting for about 8% of the citrus, and then 12% on pear and apples. So that's where we've actually seen the most noise. When it comes to diversified or alternative sourcing of wheat, there are some options in SA. Obviously, there's also its local production, but the biggest impact for SA is that 30% that they're dependent on Russia for. And then when it comes to Russia, both Russia and Ukraine, more on the East and West Africa countries, there's a much higher dependency on those two countries supplying across barley, wheat, and maize. So not so much here in the South. So that's the major sort of impact points with Russia for SA.
Thank you so much for that feedback. Okay, I'm going to take one last question from the audience. I was wondering if you could arrange a microphone. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for the presentation. My name is Kanyisile Dlamini. My question is around Botswana's growth. What are the factors that have contributed to Botswana's growth? I can see that growth is relatively high. And you might not have the figures with you today, but I would like to also know what has been the growth within the SACCO member states so that we can be able to compare ourselves since we are part of SACCO. Thank you.
Okay, so let's start with Botswana and, explaining the growth outturn last year, because I remember it was close or estimated to be close to 14%. And that was largely on account of base effects, because the contraction the year before that was quite deep. So it came off a lower base, the growth that we saw in 2021. The factors driving growth in Botswana, what is quite surprising is that the tourism sector plays quite a significant role in the economy. And we saw a significant recovery, I would say, in the second half of last year, before Southern Africa was put on the red list again. And it was actually quite good to see that the tourism sector, it was recovering off quite a low base, but you saw that growth momentum develop again. And that was quite good to see, because it was one of the sectors in Botswana that we were worried underwent structural damages and structural changes because of the pandemic. But it was good to see that they could ratchet up capacity quite quickly to actually meet new and increasing bookings into the country. Another thing that Botswana has done really well relative to other African states and even SACU and SADC, Botswana has managed to deploy fiscal stimulus really well. Of course, if you look at Botswana's fiscal balance sheet, they had the most space to do this through the pandemic and even the fiscal year that followed it. So the bulk of the recovery is still that fiscal stimulus being pumped into the economy, and actually, this is the second and third round effects now. And what was quite good to see in Botswana is that they had a number of COVID support initiatives, and they executed on them. They executed quite well, and that was actually felt throughout the economy, and that provided the support to the economy, and it also gave the economy a good base and a strong base to recover. Because in many instances where there was no support, there was structural damage to the economy. And, there are certain sectors and certain businesses that have not recovered and will die out. That was not the case in Botswana. And that's largely due to the fiscal interventions we saw. Then with regards to growth this year, it's also falling off quite significantly and returning to, I would say, the decade average level. And I think we see growth just below 4% or so. And that's quite consistent to levels we saw, maybe slightly higher, in fact, to levels we saw pre-pandemic. And, this year, that's largely due to most of the sectors within the economy recovering. If you look at GDP prints in Botswana, most sectors have shown signs of recovery, and we expect that broad-based recovery to continue this year. Another thing that informs our view, we've taken a more conservative view on tourism. So while we believe that the pandemic will fade out and become an endemic, this year we believe that the recovery in the tourism sector in Botswana will be more measured. It will continue, but I think we model more normal conditions from 2024. So that's Botswana, and that's Botswana's outlook for us. Then, before I move on from Botswana, this is an important point. Botswana's mining sector has also undergone quite a significant recovery. So that's diamonds included. Following the slump of the pandemic, we saw diamond demand improve again, and that supported prices and production, and that's also filtered through to a stronger outlook. And Botswana has a copper mine, and production in that copper mine will begin this year, or it's probably commenced already. It's already March, and that's something that will add to the economy, and as well as adding to exports. So Botswana is quite a good story to tell at the moment. Then moving to the other CMA countries, Namibia is less of a positive story to tell at the moment, mainly because this economy went into the pandemic with a number of structural issues. I mean, I think I was covering Namibia at that point, and I felt before the pandemic and before we knew that 2020 was going to be, before we knew what 2020 was actually going to be, I felt that 2020 was going to be the turning point for Namibia. And that was not to be. We saw the contraction continue. And years before 2020, we saw this economy, fall in and out of recession. And that's largely due to the government cutting back on its capital expenditure projects and consumption. So if you look at the slower growth in Namibia, you can trace it back to the budget and the government's fiscal consolidation drive. So the government has continued to be quite prudent with regards to its fiscal policy. But what they are doing a bit more successfully now, and I hope that this translates into better growth prospects, would be the fact that they are pursuing public-private partnerships more effectively. And with that said, I hope that adds to the productive capacity of the economy and adds to the economy through, sectors like construction, sectors like, I think even, the government's contribution to the economy would also improve slightly. But I believe that, this change and this shift in fiscal policy will translate into a higher growth level for Namibia. For all of the CMA countries and the SACU countries, I think it's important to note that higher SACU revenues over the next 2 fiscal years actually bodes very well for the growth outlook. And in all of these markets, higher SACU revenues correlate to higher government spending, which correlates to higher growth levels. So for me, this is definitely something positive for the regional outlook as well. Then for the smaller markets, Lesotho, a market that has struggled to recover from the pandemic, very much like Eswatini in that it's quite integrated to South Africa and dependent on remittances from South Africa. And, we think that growth here would also settle to pre-pandemic normals. So if we take out 2020 and 2021 as outliers, the years that come before that, if you look at the growth levels, then we expect that to continue. Here, we think that there could be some level of structural damage to the economy because that remittance flows from South Africa was enough over the last 2 years to sustain it. But, we're still waiting for the complete outturn from last year to make a complete assessment of that.
Thank you so much. I was going to allow one more question, but we are running short of time. So I'll have to take any additional questions at the end of the session, and we'll make sure that we address those. But thank you so much, Farishka. Really feel enlightened today. Thank you for sharing the insights. I must say, just understanding the interconnectedness of our communities, really, I feel like I am a new man today. Looking at the imports that will be impacted. We spoke about iron and steel, what that means for the construction industry and the downstream from that. Looking at fertilizers, agri industry, what does it mean for us in the Lowveld with some of the projects that we want to drive? Lastly, wheat. I'm never going to look at my box of Wheat Bix again. Before we invite people over, that Wheat Bix was at the back of the shelf. Now, we bring out the knife and fork when we have breakfast, I promise you. But thank you so much, and I must say, feeling so educated. Speaking about education, my daughter always says to me that lecturers and teachers need to go back to school. And when I ask why, she says they keep on asking her for answers. So I don't know what's going to happen, but now just a quick reminder for those of us that have arrived slightly late. We know Matsapa held a few of you back. There's still breakfast to the back if you want to grab a quick snack. To our viewers online, please go grab a cup of coffee or an exquisite bowl of Wheat Bix. We know what's going to be happening to the wheat prices, but don't go too far. Next up, we have got Mr. Boani Ntjintja. He is the executive head of trade at the Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority. He looks after the domestic and international trade opportunities for the local economy. He's also worked for various organizations within the country, namely Eswatini Revenue Authority and Eswatini Electricity Company. Please, to manage expectations, he doesn't have connections to arrange tax breaks or power installations, so please, let's not harass him after this session. So he'll be speaking to us about the business opportunities that we should be thinking about in navigating this current landscape. Please welcome on stage. Thank you.
You won't see the slides, or I stand here so that you can also see the slides. Well, my name is Ntjintja, as I have been introduced. I'm from Eswatini Investment Promotion Authority, and an agency that is responsible for trade and investment promotion in Eswatini, looking at attracting investors from outside the country into Eswatini, as well as promoting domestic investors or investment. Looking at trade, making sure that your products get through. And if you have a market, you do not have products, we markets. Well, I'll be doing slides on sustainable trade opportunities, given the time and the period that we at as a country, looking at a few. Just to put things into perspective. Thank you. All right, I'll start with what our first presenter has already highlighted, maybe just to add in a little bit of meat there to say, as a country, we are a net exporter by a very small margin on goods. That is, if we exclude services. We are a net exporter with a margin of about 250 million, 260 million, thereabout. Imports and exports at around 30 billion per annum. 30 billion per annum on our imports and exports, and a small difference of about 260 that speaks to an excess in exports. Our top imports is from South Africa, as already indicated, with about 22 billion. Now, as I'll be sharing these statistics, I think what is very important for the business community is to realize and identify that this stands as an opportunity. It's not just statistics to say if we are importing, we're spending about 22 billion on imports, goods, that's excluding services from South Africa. There's an opportunity there. An opportunity for you to trade, get a share of this 22 billion, get wherever that is being imported from South Africa. You're also part of those imports. An opportunity to invest. What if you invest in local production of the same items that are being imported from South Africa? Do we really have to spend 22 billion into the South African economy? Well, some might say, yeah, it comes back through the SACCO receipts, but think about it the other way around. What if we created our own industries with the 22 billion? How many people would we employ, and how many other spin-off industries would benefit from that one industry that we set up? So these are opportunities. Mainland China, our second largest import partner, with about 2.8 billion per annum. We're looking at the year 2021. 2.8 billion per annum, that's mainland China. Again, I think the business community is very much aware that even though we may not have diplomatic ties with mainland China, but we do business with mainland China. So, and we do advise people who are in business to say, as you source, mainland China and India in terms of affordability are at the top. Then you can consider other parts of the world, depending on the quality and the standards that you're looking at. But the reason why most Eswatini would go for products from mainland China is basically on the affordability. Issues of quality and standards, well, that varies from person to person on what you're looking for. India is up there about 800 million last year. Mozambique, imports from Mozambique. The list goes on. We're even importing from Lesotho. Lesotho about 150 million last year of imports from Lesotho into Eswatini. And unfortunately, our trade, our exports do not reflect the same with Lesotho. We're importing a lot and we're not exporting as much. Well, the next slide will probably give us a picture of our exports. Exports, again, we're exporting about 20 billion to South Africa. So now, if we are exporting about 20 billion to South Africa, then my question to you is, how much of that 20 billion is actually exports from your own company? Because again, if you're not part of these exports to South Africa, that's about 20 billion last year, there's an opportunity for you to tap into these exports. Demand within SACU and global markets is always there. It's a matter of us trying to meet this demand. We are a country that has got access to global markets, and we are failing to supply the demand of some of our products and services. Exports to Kenya, about 1.7 billion last year. Nigeria, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and so forth. Botswana, about 500 million, and the list goes on. So these are some of the export figures, just to appetite to you to say, if we have about 30 billion of exports, that is last year, how much share of that cake do you have as a company? And what if you were producing more? Chances are you would have an increase in that figure in terms of the exports. Okay. Opportunities, now speaking to specific products on what is it that we are exporting or importing and where the opportunities are. Starting with our imports, we import a lot of oil, petroleum oil and fuel, mainly from South Africa, as indicated, about 2.8 billion last year. So if you are in the petroleum industry, they have about of imports from South Africa. That's what we had last year. So you can do your calculations and see, and there's still room to tap into. ICT and electrical components, mainly imported from South Africa, mainland China and Taiwan, about 2.6 billion. Opportunity there for you to assemble in the local space, set up shop or plant here in Eswatini. Opportunity to also tap into these imports as well, sourced from any other economies. Medicines and medical instruments, 1.5 billion last year. India, United States, Turkey, and Taiwan. We know that COVID had a major role in these figures last year. Agricultural and industrial chemicals, about 820 million of imports last year from South Africa, India, the US, and China. Motor vehicles and parts, and so forth. I think the list goes on. Bottled water. I normally like to highlight the issue of bottled water because I feel it's one of those simple industries. Last year, we imported about 250 million malangeni worth of bottled water into Eswatini. Is it because we do not have enough water in Eswatini to put into bottles and package and brand and distribute around? I don't know. But yeah, there is an opportunity. 250. This is the 250 million excludes the local production that is circulating. We know we have all our own brands from Matapa and our water utility. This excludes that. So 250 million worth of bottled water that was imported. Fabric yarn, 950 million, mainly imported from China and Lesotho. We even importing maize, corn, wheat, and rice. About 1.1 billion was imported from South Africa and Argentina. So these are some of the opportunities that we have. We are consuming these products and we're sourcing them from outside the country. And there's an opportunity for you to supply these products. And further to that, there's also an opportunity for you to invest into domestic production or local production of these products. Looking at our exports, our top performing export is on the beverage concentrates, alcoholic and beverage concentrates, about 9.4 billion Malangeni. That is just in 1 year. And we know it's only 1 or 2 companies that get that share, 9.4 billion. Sugarcane product, about 6.9 billion, mainly South Africa, Kenya, Spain, Portugal, and the US. Chemical, alcoholic products, 650 million. Textile and clothing, 2.9 billion for last year. Timber and wood products, about 1.8 billion. So these are some of the products that we already have established markets as a country and we're exporting from Eswatini. So there's opportunity, there's demand for these products. For some of these products, you may think, there's already a company that's supplying these products. I normally make an example with beef, where there's already an established exporter of beef from Eswatini. But the truth of the matter is that we're not even able to meet the quota that has been allocated to Eswatini for that beef. So the current exporter is they're trying their best, but they cannot meet the demand. Further to that, this is exports to our European markets, mainly Norway. Further to that, about 3 months back, we had a client from Taiwan who was looking to slaughter about 1,000 heads of cattle from Eswatini every month. We're trying to contact our local farmers to say, can we consolidate and get 1,000 cows every month to slaughter from Eswatini? And everyone says, you want the country to run out of cows? In 8 months, we won't have anything. So the demand is there. It's a matter of the business, private sector stepping up and investing into production and making sure that you supply. In terms of markets, again, as I'm talking to opportunities for trade, we normally advise those who are doing business to say, whatsoever you're selling or you're producing, do not consider the 1.2 million people in Eswatini. 1.2 million people, it's nothing for you to do business. There's more to it outside Eswatini. With the existing trade agreements, which gives us preferential treatment of products from Eswatini, it gives us duty-free access of products from Eswatini to some of these economies. So we already have got agreements that allow our products to enter. For example, the one that's highlighted here, it's Taiwan. We have got about 153 products that can gain access into Taiwan duty-free from Eswatini. If they source these products from any other economies, they would have to pay taxes. Mainly, these trade agreements are there to help us to be competitive in terms of our exports or the price that you're selling it at to your buyer, because the cost of production, to a certain extent, is being reduced on your side. It's exclude this. So we've got about access to 24 million people, consumers in Taiwan. SACO, with over 60 million consumers, Commerce, and so forth. We've got the EU, which also gives preferential access to products from Eswatini, 720 million consumers. The Mercosur countries, which are your Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, we also have got access to those countries. Our products, they get preferential treatments. Some of them reduced duties, custom duties. Some products, they actually get duty-free access. Some products, we've got quotas that are allocated for us to supply, and so forth. AGOA, about 6,000 products that are supposed to get duty-free access into the US. We are not using or utilizing AGOA to the fullest or to the maximum potential available to us as it is. So there's still opportunity there for us. The AFCFTA is coming into effect, which is the Africa Continental Wide Free Trade Area with 1.3 billion people or consumers. I'm saying these figures so that we appreciate that when we're doing business, we're not doing business in the context of Eswatini only, but there's more to it beyond our borders. So there's still a lot that we can still do. Demand is available. It's a matter of us. I think one of our biggest challenges that we've seen with our exports or local production is the volumes. Can we consistently supply particular volumes that are being requested by our clients or the buyers? Because if they want, if he wants 2 containers of shipments every month, which basically means we need to be consistent in supplying those 2 containers. If it's, for example, the agricultural space where some of these products are seasonal, what happens if it's off-season? Then we need to engage a particular strategy to say, this is how I do business. I'm reminded of a particular company in South Africa, which I may not mention. They're in the agricultural space. What they've done is they've got farms in Cape Town, they've got farms in the Northwest, they've got farms in different areas of South Africa. To say when in one area it's getting into winter, we go do farming somewhere else. If Cape Town is favorable in that particular season, we do our farming in that particular area. This is just an example to say most of our supplies or exports in the agricultural space are affected by seasons where we are not able to consistently supply or meet the demand. I think this will be my last slide to say, I think the issue of sectors and the 5 billion budget that was mentioned earlier on, to say what are the sectors that are of priority. We all know, maybe let me just say, all government institutions, or let me say the whole of government mechanism, has been, through the National Development Strategy and the Economic Recovery Strategy, has identified 5 priority sectors. So if you are doing business in these priority sectors, it is expected and it is anticipated that all government institutions or entities that support business are going to give priority to you and to your case or to whatever issue that you are bringing, as long as you are in these sectors. We do not ignore other sectors, but these are the priority sectors that government has identified through the national strategy, which is mining and energy. I think it has already been highlighted, the issue of our over-dependence on South Africa and the year 2025 being just next door. I mean, really, we are importing about 85% of our electricity from South Africa. We're importing just close to 10% from Mozambique as well. Yes, just around 7% or so from Mozambique. So basically, over 90% of our electricity is being imported. Well, I know the energy regulator is doing some things around renewable energy and so forth. Recently invited IPPs to come in and tender for the production of electricity. Agriculture, tourism, education and ICT, manufacturing and agro-processing. So these are some of the priority sectors that government has indicated that we should focus for economic recovery. Notwithstanding that all other sectors are supported, but priority has been given to this. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I think I will pause here, stop here for now, and allow questions if there are any. Thank you very much.
We're going to take just two questions from the audience, if there are any. 2 questions. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Ntjintja, for that wonderful presentation. My name is Mangaliso Mohammed. I just have a question about Eswatini wanting to be an export-based economy. What we see is that we have very few big companies, and those big companies are actually increasing our exports, but we have a very large MSME sector, which I think you find a lot of people engaging in that sector, and so, but for them it's very difficult to sort of capitalize on these trade agreements that we have. So what is government doing to ensure that we are also thinking about inclusive growth and roping in those people that are operating in the SME sector so that they too can start taking advantage of the export drive that we want to see? Thank you.
All right, thanks for the question. I may not respond on behalf of government, but I'll respond on behalf of the agency that I'm working for. I'm working for a business support institution, even though it's a parastatal or it's a state-owned entity. So I just want to make that clarification that I'm not responding on behalf of government. From the space where I'm at, there are a number of programs that we have in place that are meant to support SME. Let me give you an example. We have a program which is called Export Readiness Program, which is an empowerment or training program for SMEs in getting them ready for exports. These export readiness programs or training sessions that we normally have, they focus on certain parts of the world or certain economies. We normally have one session that is focusing specifically on AGOA, looking at the requirements of exporting into the US, looking at the regulations, looking at the standards, the branding, and so many things that are covered. We even go to the extent of even exposing them to institutions like the Food and Drug Administration agency in the US, which is responsible for all imports that are food related. We talk through to those, we engage, we normally have speakers from these different agencies that make presentations. So these are some of the ongoing programs. For Asian markets, for example, we had a marketing and branding seminar where we're saying, trying to give perspective to SMEs to say, what the SACU market would request is different from what your Asia market wants. That is why sometimes you find that products from China, as we mentioned earlier on, we may fail to fully appreciate them from this part of the world because they are meant for their own markets, but we then consume them because of demand. But nonetheless, the point is there are programs that are in place that are speaking to these trade agreements. For Taiwan, it's another example. We even go to the extent of assisting our SMEs during exhibitions. We take their products to Taiwan for exhibitions there, and they're displayed, and normally you find that they are incentivized or there are funds that are available to assist the SMEs in exporting or in sending those products for the exhibitions. So there are programs. It would be a matter of maybe access, or maybe some companies not being aware of, or we'll find the means to make sure that everyone is aware of these programs. We have one that is running sometime next week, I think Thursday or Friday, which is on the export readiness, specifically looking at AGOA that we're running. It's not the first time. We had about 2 of these sessions last year speaking to AGOA exports. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take the next question right next to me. 1 second.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'd just like to hear your opinion on the state of our infrastructure and what effect it's having on the imports and exports. And I'd be particularly interested in hearing on the roads and rail, as well as along the borders. Thank you.
Yeah, I see you trying to get me to comment on controversial issues. but nonetheless, well, let me start with our borders. We are in a position where we are constantly or trying to engage with our counterparts, mainly the South African side, in terms of customs clearances and declarations. We have seen in the past where our vehicles or trucks from Eswatini have to a certain extent been frustrated when trying to cross the border. One of the projects or aspects or angles that is trying to address that is that our agencies have formed what is called a single window declaration process, where products or exports as well as imports are declared once, not necessarily have to declare from the Swazi side into the South African side, and again you get to the other side, we have to do the declaration. Through our systems that are in place, the agencies are working towards that so that to fast track the declarations. It has been a frustration in the past, I know, even now to a certain extent. There are some frustrations, but the agencies responsible are working around that. Coming to the road infrastructure, again, I suppose it depends on which industry and what sector you're at, as well as where you are sending your products to. But yeah, I wouldn't want to comment much because maybe government is responsible for that infrastructure. It would be just my opinion to say whatsoever government is doing, whether it's sufficient or not sufficient, I don't know. But again, the road infrastructure, if you are exporting from Eswatini, are you sending it through to Matapa so that it connects to the rail line, or you are sending it all the way out through to our borders, through into South Africa or Mozambique? So it's a matter of personal perspective to say from your angle how it is. Otherwise, I think the rail lines as well to Mozambique as well as to the South African seaports, from my perspective, I think they're efficient. Our air freight, it's not fully utilized. As you all know, we do have Sikupe, one of well-established airports, but not much is happening there. Well, maybe we do not have cargo planes, I don't know. And also the cost of using air freight for your exports and imports, it becomes expensive to use air freight, so it's a matter of choice. I'm sure the courier companies would consider bringing in a cargo if there was that demand, because most of these big companies, they do have cargo planes, but it's a matter of us placing a demand. So yeah, I'm trying not to be controversial.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ntjintja. We'll close there with the questions, but thank you for such informative feedback. Please give him a warm round of applause for that fantastic feedback. I took a few points just from your session. I mean, 260 million net exporter. I had no clue. I'm proud to be Swazi. 22 billion imports. What's the opportunity for us to grab a slice of that? And in terms of domestic production, I think definitely something that's eye-opening there. Access to global markets. Are we leveraging things like the AGOA, SACU, European Free Trade Agreement? Are we taking advantage of what's already there for us? And 250 million import of water. What a business case. You know, if you have a traditional mother like mine, every time she comes from Ntjintja, she gets into the house and every container gets saved. There's no container that gets thrown out, whether it's Rama, cooking oil, water, bottle. But I have a feeling I will start my own bottling plant very shortly. So please watch this space. And then I think lastly, you mentioned 1.2 million people in this country, but there's more to eat out there. What's that opportunity for ourselves? We always talk about what we can't do, our glass half full. A good reminder that it can be half full, and there's always more. Thank you so much. Next up, we have Mr. Lutando Vuba. He is a financial services professional who heads up Africa-China Trade and Trade Club for our business and commercial clients for Standard Bank Group. Prior to this, he was the head of Africa-China Banking and Foreign Nationals within the SA retail space, and he's also served in Standard Bank South Africa as the head of distribution and the head of private banking in Tshwane. Furthermore, he holds an MBA from ALU School of Business and has a banking career that spans more than 11 years. and he'll be speaking to us on the bank's trade finance solutions. Just out of curiosity, with China trade, do you have any clue why we call cars imported from China, Dubai? Just it always eludes me. Nonetheless, please, let's welcome him up on stage. Thank you.
Quickly get up here so that everyone can see me at the back. But once I start the presentation, if you don't mind, indulge me, I'll just be down here so that you can see the screen. My name is Lutando Vuba, and as the very colorful introduction I got from Ricky, I look after our Africa-China trade amongst many corridors that I look after, and also our trade club solution, which I'll tell you more about during the presentation. I think I come in at the very perfect time with what I have to present, with everything that's been said. And Mr. Chang, I said, probably laid the runway for me. So I'm just going to take off and tell you a little bit more about what we are doing in the bank to access and tap these opportunities, the different markets, the opportunities he's laid out. There's further insights that I'm going to share on that, how we're helping you access those opportunities. And I fully agree with him that there's a lot of opportunity. The population country size does not factor in just the sheer size of the economy can grow. I think we just have to look at Singapore for that as an example. Country with no real primary production capacity, but has an economy that's punching well in the top 10 in the world. So I'm going to now move downstairs. I do not know about why the cars are called that. That's news to me, so I do not have an answer, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so I had covered some slides on just what the trade, imports, export landscape looks like, and I think that's been sufficiently covered by our previous speakers. Farishka touched on it. Mr. Chang has also touched on it. So if you don't mind, I will whiz past some of these, but this just gives you a view of, we've heard the numbers, but just from a percentage in terms of classifications in trade, where those are sitting and what are the sort of core ones that are driving. On the export side, you'll see sugar is giving 25%, oils is leading the charge at 30%. And then on the import sides, fuels and oils, Total Energies, and then quite a number of other consumables are driving those numbers. This is a 2020 view. I just want to highlight that. So some of these have edged a bit forward in terms of percentages. I wanted to keep this slide deliberately because what you have seen in the previous slides was a 2021 view. And this is a 2020 view, and I wanted to highlight that, especially on the import side. So we've talked about the COVID impact, but the prolonged impact about it, and what we've seen come from it, particularly for Eswatini, Mr. CEO, to observe, is that Mozambique, you'll see they're not in the top 5 when it comes to imports. They've shifted aggressively in a space of 18 months to contributing 4% to the imports coming into Eswatini. And I think that's something well worth noting and looking at, especially for the businesses in Eswatini, to understand what is that movement, what is the opportunity for you. For us in the bank side is to understand how do we start to look at that as a corridor that's probably going to continue to grow. So that's what COVID did. It also opened up some close neighboring ties when it comes to what happens. And I think that's quite an interesting observation for Mozambique. And then the others, I think, just edge a bit further, especially on the export side. We know that South Africa moved from 65% in exports to about 80%, and similar on baseline. You can't cane, but there's quite a huge opportunity to boost that up and a lot with sugar cane exports. You're already exporting too, but you can do more, depending on other markets to source that outside of the continent. Another one that's there is Nigeria as well, but they are smaller compared to the opportunity in South Africa. What's currently being exported, there's a lot more that can be exported in terms of the demand that SA has, because they're then having to rest of their demand, either for that. So for the businesses in the agricultural within somewhere in the process to odoriferous substances, so in other words, inputs into Mozambique already mentioned, and there's a but us to in Uganda present a huge opportunity, Eswatini, and there's not the commodity. In terms of import, not visible. This was just to highlight what are the current concerns, and I think just maybe to add to what she had already shared is just this last bit around diversified supply chains. A lot of businesses started to think about this more deliberately with 2020 into 2021. So some businesses would think about, I need to source from elsewhere, where other businesses were starting to think, well, I need to have other options of sourcing or other options of who I sell to. So with that and starting to slowly get into a normalized environment, but now we're hit with the crisis in the East Europe, the general thinking is that to observe, but also how do you start to diversify your supply chain, regardless of currently what your exposure is to Russia or Ukraine. Because I think the world of disruption, the world of pandemics is current age that we're in, and it's forcing businesses to think very deliberately about that. So quite a number of businesses in the East Africa, Kenya, Uganda, but also in SA, are thinking about how do they start to look more South America for your wheat, your maize, not just because of this impact, but also generally, how do you start to look at South America as an alternative continent to start to source from, especially Argentina, Brazil. China really got ahead of that. In the pandemic era, that's where they switched to a lot of trade that they started to do with South America, but particularly driven by the trade war with the US. So I think some of the African countries are also starting to think of how do we start to look at these other countries or continents as alternative trading partners. Obviously, trading partners are influenced by a number of things. One of those is the bilateral agreements that are there. So the rate at which that will happen will obviously be guided strongly by what are the upsides. You know, are the tariffs going to strain your margins, or is it more lucrative to actually go that way? Interestingly, other countries are also thinking about this. So there's quite a bit of proactive engagements that they are having with some of the countries. Right. I do not know what my next slide is, so I'm shooting in the dark right now. But I think we move over to Trade Club. So I'm just going to start on Trade Club and what it is. So I've spoken about the opportunities specifically for Eswatini, where they are, how to access them. And as a bank, we have to think about what do we put in place to enable this? Where do we want to play in the value chain of trade? We want to be enabled, we already do that, obviously as a financial service institution, payments or trade finance products. But in addition to that, we have an understanding of the customer journey. Because when you are importing, say, equipment from Taiwan, you're not just having to consider the financing that you want to get from the bank. You have to think about who's clearing for you at the port in Durban, who's getting that last mile delivery to you. You have to think about what are the terms with the supplier. You have to think about who the supplier is. Do you trust them? How can you vet them? So these are all some of the things that we are seeing in the customer journey. And what we did is to understand in that customer journey, what are some of the things that as a bank we can enable. And this is a bit more non-traditional trade thinking. So we have this sort of way of classifying that there's traditional trade, which is the trade finance instruments that you have, like your letters of credit, amongst other things, collections, etc. But then we also have this non-traditional trade where we're saying it's a new world, the world is changing, we have a lot of disruptors, and certainly some industries have been disrupted. But how do we as a bank start to look at that in a way of disrupting ourselves so we can get ahead of the curve, but also what are the alternative areas to look for ways to make revenue, but also, most importantly, to add value to clients and also grow economies. So, all right, we're back. So Trade Club is a platform that Standard Bank Group is part of. So we have 15 other member banks as part of this alliance of banks across the world. Some names are in there is Santander, which are big in South America and in Europe. So these banks have come together and say, we have businesses that we bank and they trade, whether they're importing or exporting. Let's create a platform where we bring these traders together, where we stand good for them. In other words, we vet them so that when your importer is dealing with our exporter, there's that trust embedded, but also you guys can stand for creditworthiness. So this is what Trade Club is. So as a business, we onboard you onto the platform. You create your business card wherein you detail what is your business in, are you exporting, are you importing, and you detail all of that. And then on the platform, you can get, there are 3 sort of uses. You can do a bit of research. So I'm already exporting wine to the UK, but I'm looking for other alternative markets. You'll be able to see analytics and detailed data right down to tariff costs, duties, if I want to export to Argentina or to Thailand. And I can actually connect with buyers in Thailand for my product on the platform. The other one is you get matched to opportunities. So you'd have Standard Bank, we have a community manager who reports to me that will post an opportunity that there's a South African business looking to import wheat because of Russia. Then the other member banks are then able to pick up that opportunity and match it to their clients that are in that space of exporting wheat. So that's the other use case. And then one that we're introducing this year is then to say, like, how do we then get more deliberate and look at a sector and do matchmaking? So we bring then fertilizers top of mind right now. So we're looking at fertilizers and saying, especially in the East Africa region, those countries that were depending on Russia for fertilizer, we are talking with our counterpart in Canada, Royal Bank of Canada, which is also on the Trade Club platform, to say, you guys have probably gained the biggest growth when it comes to export of or import of fertilizer into Africa. Let's come together and bring some of these businesses in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania that's looking for where else can they source fertilizer. So that's a feature that we're bringing in this year. So that's Trade Club. So those are screenshots of just a sense of how it looks. And currently, these are the markets that Trade Club, we have it in. You don't see Eswatini on here right now because we're still onboarding our countries. We have done the proof of concept, and then we started to move on to onboard other countries. So we do have Eswatini in the pipeline. However, it doesn't mean that we cannot link you into those alternative suppliers if that is a need that you have. So I'm putting you on the spot. We can do linkage through our community manager. And there you get a sense of just what we've done up to date in terms of matches and some of the conversations and some of the corridors that we are seeing the most activity in at the bottom. For those at the back, South Korea, South Africa, Malaysia, South Africa, and UK, South Africa. And then I want to talk about Africa-China trade solutions. China as a region, not just a country, we had to think more deliberately about, because when you look at Africa, and you have to look at the top trading partners of all the African countries, China ranks, at least in most of them, in the top 3, and the rest of them in the top 5. So you cannot ignore the opportunity that sits with this particular corridor. Secondly, it's the corridor that has been growing the fastest in a 10-year period of between 2009 and 2019 at the average rate of 10%. And this is what will, the projections is that, and the forecasting is that it'll just continue to grow, and eventually, and I see Mr. Changas is not here, who was pushing a goer, it's going to threaten those other corridors such as the US and EU. I think they'll still be there. It just becomes who is getting the majority of the market share. And we are seeing this interplay where it's not just buying from China, but it's also selling to China. And especially the latter becoming more aggressive in the last 2 years because of the geopolitical tensions we've seen, firstly with the US and then with Australia. And I think currently there is a bit of everyone with their backsides against the wall to see on which side does China swing, and could influence even further impact on their current supply chain, especially exporting into China. And that's a big concern for them to think about, because it is a 1.3 billion population. So what we've done is to say that we have a partner bank, the Industrial Commercial Bank of China, or ICBC. They own 20% of the Standard Bank Group. And we had to think about how do we leverage that relationship in knowing that this corridor is continuing to grow, and how do we position ourselves as the dominant player in this corridor. We do have competitors such as Standard Chartered and HSBC, but when it comes to this fully integrated bank, where from our corporate right down to our retail banking, we do have that upside. So we had to think about that customer journey that I touched on. And the one solution that we enabled was the import solution, where a lot of our clients were coming to us and saying, I've had this transaction, things went wrong, I made a payment, never got anything, or I had to pay everything up front, and the goods that I got was actually what I wanted, or the quality wasn't right. When we all know the pain points of things that can go wrong when it comes to international trade. Our import solution was then to say, how do we partner with a trusted partner in China that has vetted suppliers that are reputable, that they then are the bargaining power for our client. So, and in addition to that, how do we add value to our client? In other words, the biggest concern that business will tell you is, I want to manage my cash flow. So traditionally, when you go into the market, you're dealing with suppliers that want 100% upfront, or sometimes 50% upfront pre-production. Our embedded agreement requires you to pay a 20% deposit, and the remainder can be financed by an LC. And what they do in addition to this is they pre-inspect the factory, and they post-inspect the goods before they're put on the ship and booked to be sent to Eswatini in this case. So this is what our import solution is, and we launched this in 2019 and have matured it over the last 2 years. And we now have part of it a niche solution that we've added, which looks at particularly heavy-duty trucks. And the brand that we worked with is Sinotruck, very popular in East Africa and West Africa, and some parts in the South. If you had to think about what is the equivalent, your Scania, I think even some of the Mercedes-Benz ones, that's probably what you're thinking of. But it's from equipment to tippers to truck for like long-haul freights. They produce all of that. and we've had some significant growth from that. We launched it towards the end of 2020. We were just testing and decided to scale it last year, and had significant uptake from that, especially in your Zambia, Tanzania, and Mozambique. Exports, not exactly the same as the import solution, but what we do here is we've gone on to understand what is China buying from Africa, and that is hugely concentrated in the agricultural sector. They do touch on other sectors, but the majority is in the agricultural sector. So we then moved on to get strategic partners in that space, in addition ICBC, to say your importers, bring them to the table. We have on our side, in our markets, exporters of different commodities that we can bring the two together. So we enable that through direct connection. So we'll have the supplier meet our exporter. We also do that through virtual matchmakings, and I'll show you some pictures of some of the ones that we've done in the past. And we also then actually participate in the expos that take place in China, especially the major ones, and take our clients to those. And through all those channels, we'll be able to realize quite a number of successful transactions for our businesses that do participate. I want to touch on the travel one, as it's been impacted with COVID, and we've since put it on pause, and even this year, it's not something that we will be looking at. But what we have done is to say that to our Stanbic and Standard Bank clients, how do we create a rewards program for them when they're traveling within the continent? So that's something that's been launched at the beginning of this year. So there'll be that as well for our clients that do, whether it's business travel or personal travel. This is just to unpack a bit more about what I covered around the export solution, and those are just the channels that I was speaking of. You'll see ICBC there, the emblem, because either through them we're establishing the strategic partners, or their clients that are importers, we are connecting with their importers, or we are leveraging them for vetting some of the entities that we do go into partnership with. So this is the virtual matchmaking I was talking about. This is what the first one, and the picture at the bottom was the second one we hosted in 2020. And then since 2021, we've been hosting them quarterly. We will be very focused on which products we are focusing on. And the biggest one we did last year was around wine. As I mentioned, the tension with Australia significantly impacted the wine going into China as they imposed tariffs, and we saw that drop up to 90% of exports of wine into China. So China was desperately then looking, where else do they source wine? It presented the big opportunity for wine, especially coming out of South Africa. This is the biggest expo that happens in China. It's called the China International Import Expo, and it's basically China buying from the world. We have been a part of it since its inception in 2018, and it's our flagship event that every year we are making sure that we have presence there. On the right, you can see our stand in 2019, and then the bottom was the stand in 2020. So even with the impact of COVID and our customers weren't able to travel, we ensured that they are represented by getting their products there and exhibited at the stand. And then there was a conversation by a previous speaker around energy in the country, with the dependency of 80% for it to be supplied. I think for the very aspiring entrepreneurs or serial entrepreneurs, it's something to look at. And how do you start to claw back on that dependency of what comes outside for Eswatini when it comes to energy production? This is something that we are launching beginning of next month, which is the sourcing of renewable energy products with quite a bit of focus on the solar side, as that's where the biggest demand is when it comes to renewable energy products. So I thought, let me just pull that into this to share with the audience that when it comes to renewable energy, whether it's for your own operations that you want to take off grid, or you want to get into a space where you create a plant, or you want to become an IPP and start to then supply, which you sell onto your utility provider. This is something that as Standard Bank we have now launching at the beginning of next month. And similarly to our import solution, it's end-to-end management of it, and it's embedded with the same sort of benefits, you know, the payment terms, etc. So that's on our renewable energy offering. And I think this is then the last section, Trade Suite. So Trade Suite, customer journey again. You have to think about logistics. So at Standard Bank, we've come up with this offering where, as a client, you have to think about all these things in the box. You know, clearing, insurance, forex, you need to do your payment, you need to get financing or lending for that payment, manage your exposure, what are you insuring, getting the supplies, your local logistics or last mile of delivery, where relevant, warehousing. So our Trade Suite offering does this all for you with a single point of entry. So there's one person that you deal with that manages centrally for the client. So now we've connected you with the supplier and you're ordering your goods. And then what happens is, if you're making use of Trade Suite, they then take over that process for you and then manage the ETA throughout the process and what's required until it reaches the final destination. So this is the Trade Suite offering that we've also enabled in the last 2 years. And then the last one I want to touch on is not a Standard Bank product, but it is tied to the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, and I think is of particular interest for everyone in the room to be aware of if you're not already aware of it. So part of what the AU, together with the SG that's looking after the Continental Free Trade Area, they've enabled PAPS. PAPS is supposed to be up there, is the Pan-African Payment Settlement System. So for those that are familiar with the Forex space, it is the SWIFT of Africa. In other words, what this will enable is that you'll be able to pay in your local currency. So you're buying from an exporter in Nigeria, you'll be able to pay in your local currency, and they'll be able to receive their payment in their local currency. So the hedging of the dollar and some of the cost that goes with that is then phased out when you go through PAPS. It is something that the member countries have signed on to. However, the financial institutions opt into it, similar to as we have with SWIFT. So when it comes to payments, I think in the next couple of years, we'll see this become a good option for our clients, especially for businesses when you're dealing trade transactions or you're just remitting money, especially if you're operating across different markets. This becomes a very good channel to manage that. So with that said, that ends it. Ricky, and I hope I did well with time. So yeah, I'll be taking questions from here.
Any questions from the audience? Any questions? We're fielding going once. Is that a hand? No, stretching from a big breakfast. Oh, sorry, we have a hand at the back. One hand at the back, thank you. Yeah, unfortunately, he didn't realize that when we said the theme of this forum was sustainability in turbulent times, we also were testing the presenters, so we purposely pulled the plug. So that was also staged today, just to let you know. But yeah, he did well. Thank you.
Can we hear it now? Okay. Good morning, everybody. Just a comment on what I'm listening to here. My perspective is perhaps slightly different to everybody else. My name's Gavin Adamson, so I'm in a manufacturing perspective. And I have just a comment that perhaps the room needs to take into consideration, as well as the latest presenter. And that is, we need to be very, very aware that we must stop enabling a continent of importers. If we do not change that mentality as a continent to be a continent of producers, we are going to be doomed in creating jobs. We cannot only be enabling import from China. We need to be enabling local manufacturing capacity. Doesn't matter which end of Africa we're hiding in. And I listened to the presentations, and I just have a bit of concern that we don't seem to want to go to that. All the protocols and all the trade assists is import, 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 import. And so it's just to put a different perspective on what I would hope Standard Bank starts looking forward to in the years to come. So it's not really a question, it's a comment. Thank you.
No, thank you for that. And unbeknownst to you, I fully agree with you. And I do think, as Standard Bank, it's also our opinion. It's in our slogan, Africa is our home and we drive our growth. I've come across that sentiment quite a bit of times. And the reality is this. In Africa, driving is localizing, right? Localizing production, whether it's to supply locally and is to export regionally. The reality is this, the scale sits with China. So in getting where is the scale, where can we get set up on whether it's manufacturing and the different sectors to be getting to a place where we are then producing and exporting. The current reality is that that's where the scale is sitting. And in my space, what I've observed, there's a bit of balance in that too, where it's not just to let's import into Africa, right? There's also, we want to get out of Africa and we want to create opportunities for Africa to get into China. There are special economic zones that have set up for African businesses, and we've enabled quite a number of our businesses to set up there in Hunan province. Hunan province is the designated province by the Chinese government to drive trade and investment with Africa. When it comes to that, they're very clear on how they want to enable both ends, selling and buying. So that's some of the reality that's there, and we don't see enough of it. But I think the reality in, especially your point, and I say I fully agree with you, is that the scale to get Africa to the production capacity that it needs to be able to effectively trade regionally and internationally is sitting with China and the US and UK. And I think it's about that strategic place, which localized production angle we want to go down, and how do we invest in that with a clear view of we'll be able to then trade not only with our neighboring countries, but regionally. And that's how we are thinking about it and what we're seeing. I think importing from China, we are seeing it starting to normalize, because the other thing that happened with COVID that I didn't mention, that a number of countries, and Botswana was highlighted in particular, a number of countries started to say, okay, cool, we are picking this and this to localize, and we'll put money behind it. And governments drove that. And that was already a step in the right direction. And I think we'll see more of that. But the reality is, when it comes to just the scale, be able to get there, it's sitting in the East at the moment. China's amongst them. We're also seeing quite a bit happening with India. So the scale is sitting in the East. And I think as we are growing our capacity as Africa to produce, that's the current reality.
Thank you for that. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Nothing, going once, going twice. And thank you so much, Mr. Vuba, for such a fantastic session. True demonstration of dynamicism. And thank you for sharing all the details. You mentioned Trade Club for a second there. I thought it was a big boys club. I was about to start playing background music, chill with the big boys. But yeah, thank you so much. And I think definitely great opportunities, and speaking to the strength of Standard Bank with the partnership and leveraging the ICBC partnership. I think lots and lots of opportunity. And thank you, Mr. Adam, for the comments as well, and just keeping an eye out on the greater audience and Eswatini around our own potential in terms of domestic production. I think definitely important to keep those points in mind. Next up, I would like to introduce Mr. Charles Hlwachayo. He's formerly the Standard Bank's head of personal and business banking, but now the regional head of consumer and high net worth clients, looking after Botswana, Lesotho, Mozambique, and still very much involved in Eswatini market. So if you're looking for a man with an eagle's eye view of business and the market, this is the man to speak to. I have his number. If you'd like to come see me afterwards, we can always share. Today he will be speaking to us about the Unayo banking platform for business sustainability, an area which I am very passionate about. And he will be speaking to us. I'm not sure if other banks have it, but Standard Bank Unayo. Please welcome Mr. Rajayo on stage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Holloway, and a very good morning to all of you. It's still in the morning. I am going to speak to you about Unayo today, as Ricky has already introduced. I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I'm just going to go straight into the details of this platform solution that Standard Bank has come up with. Most of you would have already seen lots of adverts that we've been putting through the different media platforms on Unayo, and I would like to believe that most of you are already using this platform. This platform has been in the making for a while now. We identified a gap in the market, and we identified opportunities that this platform presents to our customers, and we accordingly got into the works to build this solution that largely speaks to the entire value chain of the business spectrum. What do I mean? This is a solution that has got a lot of focus on financial inclusion in particular, but it is a solution that can be used by your corporates, it can be used by your small and medium enterprises, and it can also be used by your individuals. What happens with Unayo is that you will appreciate that in our traditional banking structures, there's a certain aspect, certain sector of our market that is not necessarily well taken care of. And what we did see is that opportunity that from a financial inclusion perspective, it is important to ensure that we have covered the entire market when it comes to financial services. So Unayo, what exactly Unayo does is it is an alternative transacting platform. What it offers, it basically offers all of what our current traditional banking is offering, but what it does is it ensures that we are not only focusing on our traditional bankers, but we are covering everybody. So examples of what you do. So basically what it does is you're looking at having access to this transactional platform, but you do not necessarily need to have a traditional bank account. It uses a cell phone. As long as you have got a cell phone, you can have access to this platform. You can onboard yourself, be it through the app or be it through USSD, and ensuring that you have complied with all the KYC requirements. So there's a lot of simplicity that this solution brings. What does it do? So you will be able to now make payments, and when talking about these payments, examples of some of the payments that you'll do, as I indicated, that it cuts across the entire value chain of your business. So from a corporate point of view, if you are dealing with, call it what, seasonal workers. Seasonal workers, by their very nature, are people who will not be using a bank account throughout the year. They will most likely be using a bank account for a certain period of the year when they are in employment. We are not necessarily seen to be, for that particular segment, not necessarily seen to be very affordable, so to speak. So what it does is it helps that part of the market, in the sense that you can just have access to this account, so to speak, if I can call it an account. And because it is a global business that is supported by cloud-based technology, it makes it very affordable. not only for the bank, but also for the user. So using that platform comes in at significantly reduced costs and exactly speaks to the need of the customers. So when you are dealing with your seasonal workers, when you are dealing with donor payments, where you need to make payments to different parts of the country, and people who are not necessarily in the cities, it's one of the most appropriate solutions that you'll have. This solution, you'll be able to withdraw your cash either from a standard bank ATM or from merchants, which are spread all over the country. And we are still in the process of spreading those merchants throughout the country. The other benefit around this is that you are not only just looking at merchants in terms of established businesses, but you can also, as an individual, register as a merchant yourself, where you'll be able to provide merchant services to the Unayo customers. This also speaks to payment of suppliers. So as a corporate or as a business, you can make payments to your suppliers, where those suppliers that are using the platform and want to be paid on the platform, and they are also doing business with other customers or suppliers on the platform. So it's not only just meant for individuals. You're also looking at industries that have got large volumes of employees. In most instances, the employees that are not necessarily your top end, but the low end. Unayo becomes a much more cost-effective way of making your salary payments through that platform. So from a business point of view, being cloud-based technology obviously comes with highly reduced costs, which helps overall in terms of reduction of costs from a transactability perspective. Another aspect of this is that it also has API capabilities, meaning that it can easily integrate with your different systems at record speed and at very, very minimal costs, if any. The other aspect that is quite key from a business point of view is around the reconciliations aspect. As you know, that reconciliations obviously become an issue when you're talking about systems integrations. This solution comes with automated reconciliations, which obviously saves a lot of time from a reconciliation perspective. So there's quite a number of benefits for the solution from that perspective. I think the other important aspect is that the more we use this solution, we are able to track the data and the transactions that are happening in there as an individual, as a business, in particular small and medium enterprise businesses, and we're then in a position to use behavioral scoring to ascertain the level of transactions that are taking place there and be in a position to score you in terms of what you could potentially qualify for in terms of lending facilities. So in terms of the businesses that you are working with, this solution will then put them in a position that they are able to get financing, and that is going to help without necessarily having to go through the traditional ways of offering lending to either individuals and even businesses. Of course, it is just been launched. We launched this late last year, and we are still in the process of continually adding features and functionalities to this solution. We are certainly looking at taking this further to a point where we're able to make cross-border payments as well as international payments. That's not exactly where we are right now, but that is certainly the journey. So I would certainly, the whole idea today was just to paint a picture to what you have been seeing being advertised all this time in the different media platforms. And I would like to encourage you to please partner with the bank in terms of using these solutions and start realizing the benefits of this solution. Having said that, I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to end here, and if there are any questions, very happy to take those questions. But I do want to say that there is no better qualified person in this room to talk about this solution other than our program director himself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Maise, for such calm words. I feel like the hot potato has been thrown back. But happy to field any additional questions coming out from the Unayo and Unayo journey from the audience. Thank you. We've got one question.
Thank you. I'm Ntjintja Dlamini, the Executive Director from the Southern Action Group Against Abuse. And I want to say already enrolled for Unayo. Very convenient and easy to use. But the only thing that I don't agree with is that it has highly reduced costs. And the reason I'm saying that, it's because we're working with community cadres and we actually have to pay for them to withdraw. And each time I'm making transactions, the more you are withdrawing, the more you have to pay. And I felt the charges are a bit on the high side. So I don't know if you would actually look into that and see how we can actually reduce the costs of withdrawing, because yeah, it does come with a cost. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I think we'll definitely take your feedback into consideration. When the Unayo product solutioning was in flight, competitiveness in the market was completed. And I think the best part about the solution is the flexibility, even when it comes to things like ability to price and adapt and change that. So we'll definitely take your feedback into it and we'll revert directly through to you. Don't know if there's an additional question.
Thank you. My question, thank you for launching Unayo. And the part I like is addressing financial inclusion issues. However, the question is, how do we access the funds from the Unayo platform? Do I have to go to a Standard Bank ATM or whatever? Or do we have agencies across the country so that I have easy access? Because inclusion, you speak rural. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a fantastic question. So Unayo hybrid wallet account gives you access to the funds, one directly from any Standard Bank ATM. So that's your first alternative. And we have over more than 84 ATMs across our geography. The second alternative is to visit a participating merchant. So if you are an individual or you are a business and you wish to sign up as a merchant over and above becoming an Unayo client, you can then access the merchant module and you can provide services on behalf of Unayo, such as cash in and cash out, and you will earn commission. So Unayo is not only just a mechanism to provide a financial platform, but it's also an economic opportunity to create a livelihood in the communities. So you can also access the funds from a participating merchant store in your community. I think the other beauty about the Unayo platform is that you can sign up yourself from the comfort of your home. You can either download the app, and there's also access using what we refer to as USSD or cell phone banking, and you can dial *334#, and that's the mechanism which you can also access the platform. There's another alternative, which is also a beauty about this hybrid wallet account that we have in the form of Unayo, is that from your wallet, you can now directly send funds to any bank account straight from your wallet, which I think is not something that you can do with many other wallets in the market and globally. So those would be the mechanisms which you'll be able to access your funds. Okay. Any additional questions on Unayo? Yes, I think a fantastic comment from the audience. You can also purchase airtime and electricity using the Unayo app. I think there's just so many points, and just thank you again to Maise for sharing the details around the Unayo solution. I think some of the points that he shared is around the accessibility, I think the other one that is maybe implied is it's agnostic to your mobile provider. So whether you bank with Eswatini Mobile or MTN, you can access Unayo. And you don't have to have a Standard Bank account, by the way. You can create and access Unayo right now, wherever you are, in any corner of Eswatini. And just a reminder for our viewers back home, please do try it out yourself. Go online, download the app. The wallet can be opened from the comfort of your home. You can earn a commission. Funds are accessible from an ATM. You can buy electricity. And the platform is in real time. Okay, I'm going to stop there on Unayo. I know we're running close to the schedule. But what I do want to do, I want to take us to our final speaker. Last but not least, and contrary to popular belief, he's not a KGB Russian agent, but you'll see when he comes on stage, definitely not. However, he can annihilate a balance sheet and income statement analysis. That I can guarantee you. Mr. Barry Schützler is our head of corporate and investment banking and has been with Standard Bank Swaziland for a number of years. Joined us from Lesotho in 2019. We put him on loan there. So for those that don't know, he was in Eswatini before that. So the adopted son of our soil, Mr. Barry Schützler. Please do help us welcome him on stage.
I'm in a suit. For the first time in 2 years. I think I clean up fairly decently. Not as decently as Trevor Noah down here, but still not too bad. But I think if I had have put the suit on a month or two ago, I would have thought we're starting to return to normal. COVID's kind of becoming a thing of the past. We may be starting to work from the office a little bit more. I've got a suit on. It's becoming a bit normal, more normal. And then Putinism reared its head. And they invaded Ukraine. And things changed again. The economic outlook changed, as you've seen from our presenters here today. We did have a presentation that was probably put together about a month or two ago, which is stale and old by now. So all you heard here today, in a month or two's time, it'll probably be completely different. So yes, what is normal nowadays and what is the future? I think the one thing for certain is that the future is uncertain. And we probably live in the most uncertain times in history. And it's probably just going to get worse or better, depending on which way you view it. But that uncertainty is going to continue spiraling. And I think, as a result, both ourselves and yourselves, our customers, we need to make sure that we're future ready. I know you've heard that word sprouted here once or twice during the presentations today. But we need to be future ready in order to survive going forward into the future. We as a bank can no longer call ourselves a bank because we've become a Nokia or a Kodak. We need to be a financial services provider. I read an article last year, sometime I think it was, where they actually said that because of what's happened with COVID and the way technology has leapfrogged as a result, we're 10 years ahead of our time. So we're actually in a futuristic movie here at the moment. We're in the year 2032. And I think we need to remember that, and we need to stay abreast of that. And I think certainly from our perspective as a financial services provider, we're here to walk that walk with you guys into the future and hopefully smooth that ride out for you and help you develop with this future as it spirals out of control. And I think you will have seen that today with the presentations. I mean, we had a virtual presentation here. I think it's the first time we've ever had that. Yes, and along with that came some technical glitches as well, which isn't uncommon in this day and age. We're on social media. So technology has moved along very rapidly and taken us with it whether we're going kicking and screaming or we're going along and enjoying the ride. But I think from what you can see here today, we've spoken about platform banking, Unayo being part of that. Eventually, we're going to get to a stage where hopefully you'll come into our platform and you'll be able to do whatever you're looking to do without leaving the Standard Bank platform. You'll be able to trade with China and hopefully some other countries as well, not just China. You'll be able to buy a cup of coffee, buy insurance, do your banking, etc., all on this one platform, which is hosted by ourselves. We've spoken about ecosystems and value chains. We as a bank, obviously, we've had to change how we perceive ourselves as banks and how we think, and to think out of the box. So, we're wanting to look at your ecosystems and your value chains and trying to unpack it for you along the whole value chain, and look after the whole value chain in terms of your operation. Trade opportunities we spoke about. So there's been quite a bit of food for thought here today, and hopefully that's given you something to think about. I think to Ricky's point as well, the one that struck me as well is 250 million rands worth of opportunity in just bottling water. I mean, come on, that looks like a simple one and an easy one, Mr. Jacobs. So yeah, I think I think hopefully what we've presented here today has given you some food for thought, from an economic perspective, from a business perspective, from the way we are changing about our thinking and the products that we're looking to put out there. And so it's from my side, it's just for me to finally say some thank yous, and just to say to Wetu, so yeah, I didn't just get up here and say thank you, goodbye. I did take up some of the time, but we are sort of hitting the limits in terms of our time. So just to maybe say thank you to our presenters, both internally and externally. I think they were great presentations, and as I say, I think gave us some good food for thought there. If we can just maybe give them a round of applause, please. Also then, I think also to our marketing team for putting this on. I know there was sweat in the 11th hour in terms of putting it all together, but just thank you very much to the marketing team and everyone else that helped put the day together. And then last but not least, that's to thank you, our customers, for your custom. Because without you guys, we wouldn't be here. Just to say that we're here to walk with you and into the future and take your businesses into the future, take advantages of these opportunities that we're showing up here. But yes, just one big round of thank you very much from a Standard Bank perspective to you, our customers. And hopefully the time spent here was worthwhile, and drive back to your offices safely and enjoy the rest of your day. But on Standard Bank's behalf, thank you very much. Appreciate it. No questions.
Thank you very much. And that concludes our opening remarks. Now, a big thank you to Barry for closing, and again, a big thank you to our audience here in person, and a big thank you to our audience online for joining us today. It definitely has been fantastic, and I hope this session has opened our eyes not only to the challenges and risks we need to avoid, but also to the opportunities that I also just want to say a big thank you to our CE and leader in charge for his support and guidance today. A big thank you as well to the Royal Villas for the event today, that have been here supporting us and ensuring that we get the coverage. And a big thank you to our audience and everyone here today. So please do enjoy your day further and have a fantastic day and remainder of this week. Thank you.
we come to the end of the Standard Bank Economic Forum for 2022. It has been a very successful event, a magnificent event, I must say, magnificent event, well organized. The CEO is here, he's leading a fantastic team. They always say behind a very successful man there is always a woman, but I'm saying today there is always a good team, and Standard Bank has really shown us, has really led the way. They are saying, as far as the economy of the kingdom is concerned, Eswatini is our home. We drive her growth. CEO, thank you so much for such a wonderful event. I'm sure you must be happy.
Yes, thank you to Maswati for listening in and joining in.
Yeah.
But we think that we've made our contribution as always. We believe that Eswatini is our home, as you say. We drive her growth.
Yeah. So you've been hosting the Economic Forum for a couple of years now. Do you have a yardstick to say that is how we measure the success of such a very important event?
It's difficult to measure success,
Yeah.
but we want to believe that the benefits of these events are actually seen in the real economy. I mean, who would have thought that would have a factory like Kellogg sitting in Eswatini today, supplying Southern Africa from here?
Yeah.
You know, it is these events where you sit and talk and identify opportunities for trade and then finance and create business opportunities and create employment. That is our contribution.
Njengoba vele siseswatini bongo kahle njengoba nasibu YouTube umsebenzi ubukelwa nabantu abaningi labangekho la eSwatini umcwalo ukuthi nanabo basive nemaswati ngifisa sive ngiyafuna nokuthola CEO ekuthenini nilibhange ngivele ukuthi uyathatha imali yethu usigcinele phezulu ukuthi nihitela abanye level qhubeke liphile nibuka i-contribution leseniyendile kule live nekwesekela nje amabhizinisi ase-Eswatini nibuka ke nalesimo lesikhona nyalo currently sitekenza bangivinza base-Ukraine ithinta kakhulu la ukuthi kusho kuthini lokwenteka le especially ku-agriculture nitaqhubeka yini nilibhanga nikhone kusekela emabhizinisi la kule agriculture ngoba nithi nisebenzisa amagama labhanga nithi risk ukuthi niyaqhubeka yini nisekele despite what is happening globally.
Yeah, simo semnotho emhlabeni vele lento lendeka eRussia nase-Ukraine ingeke ihlale kusi-affecta ngoba kusho ukuthi because baya-produce abo-oil basupply umhlaba i-demand ya-oil setawukhuphuka and therefore i-price itawukhuphuka nayo ngoba i-supply seyinciphile. So because of that sekuyasho ukuthi ama-cost of goods for emaswati sekatawonyuka and ezenyuka akusho lokho ukuthi sesehlulekile sitawukhumbula ukuthi umhlaba ubuya ku-2010 2008 to 2010 when there was a global economic crisis. Even then emabhizinisi nemabhange kakhulu lawo la survive akhona kuchubeka sithi ama-customers awo ukhumbule ukuthi emabhange asurvive for as long as kunemuntu otawufaka imali ebhange mangabe sekude labo bantu lelo bhange lelo sekude umsebenzi lingawenda. So as long as bantu bangasethemba ngema-deposits abo nathi sitawuqhubeka sikhone kusita labo labafuna ku-investa kulo mnotho waseswatini.
CEO, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I'm not very sure now, we were here in this very same room.
Yes.
And again, you represented the private sector when government was launching the economic recovery strategy. You touched on so many subjects, certain bottlenecks that government had to remove for the private sector to thrive. You are driving Eswatini economic growth. Looking back now, 2023, we are expecting a new government. Those bottlenecks you spoke about, are they still there?
Unfortunately, when dealing with the government, and it's not unique to the government of Eswatini, globally, governments are not as quick to do things, and that's just because of the regulatory framework which government has to operate under. whether it is because they have to go through parliament, they have to go through, but before a paper even gets to cabinet, there are principal secretaries, there are the technocrats in government that have to deal with it and motivate it. It has to be reviewed by the Attorney General, it has to go through various stages, and that is what at times takes time for government to get into the decision-making table. But the intention is what is important. As long as we in business know that government is intentional about wanting to make private sector succeed and private sector much more active and private sector to be a very active participator in the economy, there is no doubt that things are going to, I mean, for the first time in many years, we saw mining licenses being issued in a very, very short space of time. So even though we can say that government is slow, when they do eventually get to make decisions, we saw 2 or 3 licenses issued in a month or two towards the end of last year. And that for me is an indicator that eventually when you make enough requests from government, they will eventually come to the party and enable private sector to thrive. Now, those businesses that have been awarded licenses, we expect them to start employing a Eswatini and creating a real impact on the economy.
Finally, CEO, when you look at the caliber of people who always attend such an event, you look at the engagement, the kind of questions that they ask, and that should be saying to you, some of the players in the industry, even those who are not in the banking sector, they always look forward to Standard Bank hosting such an event.
Of course, the majority of the people that are here range from retail bank customers to large corporate customers. So we create the platform so that they can meet each other, they can talk to one another, but also that they can take whatever they take from this economic forum and go and implement in their own companies. I mean, for instance, we're talking about payments across within Africa, for Africa, so, and using your own currency to pay another country in Africa. So those things are innovative, but such forums bring to the fore the real issues in financial services that banks can put on the table.
CEO, thank you so much for affording us the opportunity to speak to you. We appreciate you. Keep shining.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
That was the CEO of Standard Bank, CEO Mr. Mvuselelo Fagosebongosi njoba kuphetha lo msebenzi we Standard Bank Economic Forum for 2022. Umsebenzi ke ube muhle indlela lesimangaliso. Siyabe sibesiqhubeka nje sikhulumisana naletinye tikhulumi lebesitelo tithula tinkulumo la tisichacha nje tindzabeni letiningi nginababe luthandovu banje manje. Ngivile lo ekuthenini uyinake kakhulu indzaba ye trade Africa China. I think that's when I'm going to dwell much. It has been a fantastic, I think 2-3 hours, very insightful, the engagements that were there. I am sure we are now we know what is happening globally in terms of the economy. But we are in the kingdom of Eswatini. We know the relations, political relations there is with China. Is there a disadvantage for us?
I think it's how you think about it.
Okay.
I would like to throw that back to you as a people of Eswatini. You see Chinese businesses in Eswatini. There is, when we shared the information, there is imports coming from China into Eswatini. So I think in answering your question, looking at what's in the market tells me that there is activity happening. Yes, there is, the diplomatic relations which are not in a good place. But at the moment, it's not having a direct impact in the trade between the two countries, or at least the businesses, right? So I think it's a disadvantage from how big or the scale that it can reach, because there is the relationship with Taiwan and that agreement and that beneficiation for Eswatini businesses where, it's duty-free. So I think it's for businesses and how they think about the opportunity. What is coming from China that you cannot get from, Taiwan? And optimally, how does it benefit your business? And I think that is the upside. The advantage is that it's not to the extent where it is straining any activity with China. And I think it's not just China. There's India, there's Malaysia, to think about. And I think what COVID pushed us into and where we are at, it's about which markets presents the best opportunity for Eswatini, for your business, and how do you start to exercise into that. A lot of the countries are now looking at revisiting their own diplomatic relations with different countries and looking at this thing of tariffs. Because I think outside of the continent, a lot of the markets are feeling the pressure that is brought on by the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where Africa will be trading more with Africa, and there's a horizon to eventually get to a tariff-free zone. That it will take away from kind of what's depended on from Europe, Asia, South America, and North America. So those pressure points, and that's we're seeing. There's a revisiting of AGOA. There's UK looking at how do they tighten. So there is this. Let's get closer because they see what that can unlock and essentially take away from currently what they enjoying from a trade that they do with African countries. And Eswatini is right there. But what's good about Eswatini, they've already moved into doing more trade. We know obviously SA is the dominant player in both, but outside of that, there's already a move towards more of the African market. So I think it's very opportune, but it's the right direction that Eswatini businesses are looking at to say, we're going to look at our African markets and see how we broker those corridors, trade corridors. Yeah.
Through experience, Mr. Ntjintja, through experience, we export a lot of sugar in this country.
Yeah.
What are some of the opportunities that are there in China that probably some businesses in certain sectors can tap into and maybe they can thrive?
Yeah. No, I think when it comes to the sugarcane industry, the only relevance that I see currently, and I could be, missing any other, but the only relevance I see for China is the equipment input. So when it comes to the kind of equipment that can, be innovative for the sugarcane industry. For instance, I know we have a client in Kenya that is utilizing the debris. I'm not an expert, but once they process the sugar, what's remaining, they're using some of that to burn it to then generate electricity to power up the same operation. So it is those kind of things that optimize your business. And I think those sort of high-tech sort of equipment or machinery, China along with Europe present that. I think the sugarcane industry has a great opportunity to grow in Africa. That's where the biggest opportunity is, to supply into East Africa mainly, and also South Africa, but also the SACU countries. I think that's where the biggest opportunity is. So whatever the production level is currently, I think if Eswatini had to double that, there'll be demand for it. So that's where the biggest opportunity is. But then in doing that, in growing that industry, like I said, the innovative, the high-tech equipment is coming from the likes of Europe and, the East, China amongst those. So I think that's really where the opportunity is. And I'd like to see, whether it's from a government or the business community in Eswatini, really tap that. I think Eswatini could well be in a good position to say that when it comes to Africa, we're in the top 5 for sugarcane production. Yeah.
Mr. Ntjintja, thank you so much for coming through. We appreciate you. We appreciate the presentation that you delivered there. I'm sure a lot of businesses in this country will benefit. Thank you so much.
No, thank you so much.
Nimbala bankosisi la kumhlangano lomkhulu lo Standard Bank kanti benza ba lesibuka ngiyenza ba yale economic forum yakhe Standard Bank siyaqhubeka nje sifuna nekuteka yenza ba unayo lamanye amabhange ede Standard Bank unayo. I think that's the quote of the day. Standard Bank unayo lamanye amabhange ede. Talk to us about unayo. The question that I got from some of the viewers, even those who are watching online, how do you deposit money into this app?
Thank you. Yes, Unayo, made for the community, made for everyone out there, made for anyone. You don't have to have a bank account. And getting money into it is also just as simple. You can transfer money from your own bank account into Unayo. If you go into the Unayo app, you can actually view your Unayo account number, and you can use that as the destination bank account to send your funds to. So you can send directly into the account. Then you can also deposit cash at your nearest merchant. And we've got about over 200 businesses that have already signed up across the country. So you can visit your nearest merchant or shop and you can deposit there. So lots of access. We're also working now to create access as well so you can deposit on over 40 depositing ATM devices countrywide.
You provided this platform because there was a gap in the market. That's what I heard. And one is wondering, what was that gap that prompted Standard Bank to introduce Unayo?
Yes, no, definitely a big gap in the market when we look at aspects of financial inclusion. And that is something that the Central Bank of Eswatini has also been driving quite passionately. So access being the first one and cost of financial services being the second. So you find that with the Unayo solution, there is no monthly fees on the account. So we make sure that it's definitely within reach of every citizen in the country. And then from an access perspective, it's not only available on the app, which you can download from either the Apple Play Store or Google Play Store, but you can also access it using your old mobile phone, dialing *334#. So it's also creating access. The other beauty about the gap in the market, it was not just for the seasonal workers that we referred to earlier on, or infrequent workers, but it also creates access also for traders. So for our SMMEs in the market, they have the ability now with Unayo, if you sign up, you can accept payments at a store. And when you pay using Unayo, either using a short code or a QR code, as the person conducting the transaction, you then do not pay for it. And again, creating that financial access. You can do it on your phone, the simplicity at home. When you go to a store, you can sign up as a merchant, you can provide service and receive payment. So it really provides a mechanism which communities can transact together. The other beauty about being a merchant is you can now earn commission as well. So there's also a chance to create a livelihood for Eswatini, and that we are very happy and humble about.
Now, how has it been received by the masses out there?
Yeah, I must say we were very surprised. In the few months from when we launched it, we have over 10,000 clients in just a few months that have signed up. The feedback from the clients is they love the simplicity. They love the ability to open the account at home. You don't have to visit a branch. You don't have to visit a store. You can do it yourself at home. Even with the *334#, you can also register with your ID, and you will be validated, and you will have a basic wallet which you can start to transact on almost immediately. And similarly with the smart app, if you want to transact at much higher levels, you provide your ID, you do a selfie using the app, and you provide your proof of residence, and then you can transact at much higher levels that you would do with a bank account. So you have all the simplicity of a wallet, but the sophistication of what you would get in a traditional bank without the cost.
Must I be, my final question, must I be in this country to be able to use Unayo? Those who are traveling, if they're in Zambia, Malawi, will be able to transact using Unayo?
Yeah, that's the beauty about when things move into the cloud, technology, online. You can do it from your home. So as long as you can access the dial code, *334, or if you have the app, you could actually sign up while you're in holiday in Europe. And from there, you've got your details on the system. You'll be able to transact immediately. Buy airtime for your loved ones at home, pay for electricity for Gogo, who's in the homestead. So yes, you can still be able to transact when you move internationally.
It's a fantastic app. I am using it. In fact, I'm a customer, Standard Bank customer. Thank you so much for coming to my private.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Nembana besiteka-ke bonkosinza ba yemhlangano i-Standard Bank Economic Forum 2022 la Royal Villas Zubini. Msebenzi-ke ubephethiwe la indzaba lenkulu, indzaba yemnotfo. Kufune kube ne-production eqinile hlangothini lwaka-agriculture kule mlichubekako i-Russia ne-Ukraine. President welive le-Algeria uwavalile-ke ukuthi ba-importe tikudla lokuthide ukuthi sifikile isikhathi ukuthi sale bakwakha ngakhathi. Lo mhla kunemhlangano wakanethu kwitekwendzaba te-energy. Ngiletinye indzaba letikhona kule strategic plan sahulumende le ma-sectors lasihlanu, the mining sector, the energy sector, the tourism sector, lo fekhathi neka processing and education and ICT. We hope the economy of the kingdom will thrive. Babekisa ukuthi umnotho ungende kakhulu lokungenani nga 2%. Sinethemba lelikhulu ke bonke ukuthi uyakhula kakhulu kunaloko njengoba intengo yesinkwa siyayiva iyadula nemafutha nayo iyadula. From me Lincoln Kulem and the team, it has been a fantastic show. It has been magnificent. My producer Sibusiso Pembe is saying hi to everyone. Bye bye.